The roar of the crowd was thunder in my chest. The November air bit through my jersey, sharp and cold, but I barely felt it. The floodlights cut through the evening mist, turning the field into a glowing stage of green and gold. Every shout, every snap of the ball, every tackle echoed through the stands like the world was holding its breath. Luke lined up beside me, tapping his cleats against the turf, his breath puffing white in the chill. 3rd and 6, he muttered, his tone calm, focused. You ready? I grinned under my helmet. Always. We'd played together for 2 years, teammates, roommates, and something that always felt like more but never crossed that invisible line. He was the kind of guy who made hard work look easy. Captain, top scorer, the guy everyone trusted when things got tight. To me, though, Luke wasn't just the team's golden boy. He was my closest friend, the person who stayed up with me during finals, who knew how to talk me down when nerves got the best of me before a game. The whistle blew. The world shrank to motion and noise. Luke broke from the line, his body slicing through defenders like he was built for it. I blocked a linebacker coming in hot, felt the jolt in my shoulders, but stayed upright long enough to see the quarterback's pass cut through the air, spiraling perfectly toward Luke. Then came the hit. It wasn't the kind of collision you forget. Pads cracked, helmets slammed, and the sound, God, the sound, cut straight through me. Luke went down hard, his leg twisting under him, his shoulder driving into the ground at an angle that made my stomach turn. Everything stopped. The crowd noise faded into a low, uneasy hum. The whistle blew once, sharp and distant. I yanked off my mouthguard and sprinted before anyone else moved. Luke lay on the turf, his jaw tight, trying to breathe through the pain. Don't move me, he muttered, voice rough. Hey, it's okay, I said, kneeling beside him, not caring about the mud soaking into my uniform. Just breathe. All right? Trainers are coming. His leg looked wrong. Not broken, but strained in a way that made him wince every time he shifted. His left arm was clutched to his chest. Sweat beaded on his forehead even in the cold. The medics jogged over, and I backed up, watching helplessly as they checked his vitals, rolled his shoulder gently, asked him questions he barely answered. When they helped him to his feet, I was already there, slinging his good arm over my shoulders to steady him. He leaned into me, his weight heavy but familiar. You okay? I asked quietly. He gave me a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. I'll live. Hurts like hell, though. I didn't know if I should laugh or curse. Instead, I just kept my grip firm as we limped toward the sideline together. The crowd clapped as we passed, a slow, sympathetic rhythm that somehow made it worse. Coach met us near the tunnel, his brow furrowed. That shoulder's not right. Luke, you're out for the week, maybe longer. Luke grimaced but didn't argue. He wasn't the kind of guy who'd ever admit pain unless it was serious. Coach's gaze shifted to me. Ethan, you're with him. Make sure he doesn't do anything stupid. Trainer says he'll need help with daily stuff until the swelling goes down. You're his shadow, understood? I nodded. Yeah, I got him. Luke rolled his eyes. I don't need a babysitter. Coach shot him a look that said otherwise and walked off to handle the next play. Luke leaned against the tunnel wall, catching his breath. Guess I'm grounded, he muttered. Could be worse, I said, forcing a grin. At least you've got me. He laughed softly, then winced. Don't make me laugh, man. It hurts. Up close, I could see the strain in his face, the small tremors in his arm when he tried to move it. It hit me then, not just worry for a teammate but something sharper. I'd seen him take hits before, walk away bleeding, bruised, still smiling. But this time he looked human, fragile even, and that scared me more than anything. We sat in the locker room after the game, the team filtering in with the dull thud of cleats on tile and the hiss of showers turning on. Luke was quiet beside me, ice pack strapped to his shoulder, legs stretched out. You're really gonna hover all week? He asked after a while. Coach's orders, I said, trying to sound casual. You know how he gets. Luke tilted his head, studying me with that familiar half-smirk. You don't have to sound so excited about it. I tried to laugh, but it came out uneven. Hey, I'm just being a good teammate. He didn't push it. That was one of the things I liked about him. He always knew when not to. The bus ride back to campus was quiet. Luke leaned his head against the window, eyes half closed, the reflection of passing streetlights sliding across his face. I caught myself looking too long, then turned away. My chest felt tight, like I'd run a mile even though I was sitting still. When we got to the dorm, I helped him up the steps. He tried to wave me off, insisting he was fine, but I stayed close anyway. Inside, he eased down onto his bed with a groan. "Man, this is gonna suck," he muttered. I shrugged off my jacket and sat on the edge of the opposite bed. "I'll make sure you survive." He looked over at me then, really looked. "You're serious about this?" "Yeah," I said. "Coach told me to help. And besides," I hesitated, then forced the words out with a smile. "You'd do the same for me." He didn't argue, just nodded, a little softer this time. "Yeah, I would." The room went quiet except for the hum of the radiator. He leaned back, eyes closed, a small smile on his lips despite the pain. I watched him for a moment, his hand resting lightly over his injured shoulder, his breathing steadying. Something in my chest shifted then, something I didn't want to name. I turned off the lamp and lay down on my bed, staring at the ceiling. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Luke's breathing evened out, slow and calm. And in the dark, I whispered to myself the thought I couldn't shake. "I've got you, man, no matter what." And I meant it, though even then, I wasn't sure if it was the promise of a teammate or the beginning of something else entirely. By Monday morning, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving behind the dull ache of reality. Luke's shoulder was wrapped tight in athletic tape, his thigh covered in deep bruises that looked worse under the dorm light. He sat on the edge of his bed, half-dressed, trying to tug his hoodie over his head with one good arm and a lot of stubbornness. "Need a hand?" I asked, leaning against the doorway with 2 mugs of coffee. He shot me a look that was somewhere between annoyance and defeat. "I've been fighting this thing for 5 minutes. I think it's winning." I set the mugs down and crossed the room. "Let me." He lifted his arm slightly, wincing as I helped ease the hoodie over his head. My fingers brushed the back of his neck, warm skin under my touch, and for a second I felt him tense. Not from pain, but something else. I stepped back quickly, pretending not to notice. "There," I said, forcing a grin. "Fully dressed. 10 out of 10 effort." "Yeah," he muttered, glancing down at his arm in the sling. If only the rest of me worked this well. Luke had never been good at sitting still. He was the kind of guy who ran drills after everyone else hit the showers, who stayed up late watching game footage, who measured his worth by what he could do with his body. Now, every movement looked like an act of quiet defiance against his own frustration. I handed him his coffee. "You're not missing much. Coach said they're mostly running light practice this week anyway." "Still feels weird," he said. "Being here while they're out there." He took a slow sip, eyes on the window. Outside, the field lights glowed faintly in the early mist. "Feels like I'm letting everyone down." "You're not," I said, maybe a little too firmly. "You got hit hard. You need to heal." He gave a short laugh. "You sound like Coach. Maybe I should start yelling about hustle and grit while I'm at it." That earned me a real smile, small, but genuine. He leaned back against the wall, coffee balanced on his knee. "Guess that makes you my nurse now, huh?" I shrugged. "Could be worse. I've had worse patients." "Oh yeah? Like who?" "You last season, when you played half a game with a sprained ankle and told everyone it was just tight laces." He groaned, rubbing his forehead. "I was an idiot." "Still are," I teased, and he flicked the corner of his coffee sleeve at me. It hit my chest and dropped harmlessly to the floor, but the look he gave me, half defiant, half amused, made something flutter in my chest. The rest of the day was a mix of small things that shouldn't have felt intimate but somehow did. Helping him tie his shoes before class, carrying his tray in the dining hall, holding open doors when his shoulder refused to cooperate. Each moment was ordinary, almost boring, but the space between them wasn't. It was filled with glances that lingered a beat too long, silences that carried more weight than words. By the third day, he stopped protesting my help. "Okay," he said one morning, as I handed him a fresh shirt. "You win. I officially can't do anything without you." "Good," I said, tossing the shirt at him. "Admitting it is the first step to recovery." He caught it with his good hand, smirking. "You sound way too happy about that." "Maybe I like being needed." The words slipped out before I could stop them. For a second, the air between us shifted lighter, then heavier. Luke blinked, like he wasn't sure if I was joking. I forced a grin and added, "Besides, it gives me an excuse to boss you around." That broke the tension. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Man, you're impossible." Later that night, the room was dim, the only light coming from the small desk lamp between our beds. Luke sat shirtless, his sling off, trying to rotate his shoulder just enough to keep it loose. I'd read somewhere that gentle movement helped, but even watching him hurt. "You're pushing it," I warned. He grimaced. "If I don't, it's just gonna get stiff." "Yeah, well, you're not gonna heal faster by pretending you're fine." He stopped, eyes meeting mine. "You always this bossy?" "Only when I care." The words landed differently this time. He looked at me for a moment too long, then smiled faintly. "Guess I can live with that." I grabbed the small gel pack from the mini fridge and handed it to him. "Here, use this instead of showing off." He held the pack but didn't move it right away. "You ever notice how weird this is?" he asked quietly. "What?" "This. Sitting around, not doing anything. You taking care of me like it's normal." "It kind of is now," I said. He laughed softly. "Yeah, guess it is." He pressed the ice to his shoulder and let out a slow exhale. The sound wasn't pain this time, just tired. For a while, neither of us spoke. The quiet felt comfortable, like something we'd fallen into naturally. When he started to nod off, I stood to turn off the lamp. His voice stopped me. "Hey," he said softly, half asleep. "Thanks for sticking around." "Always," I said. It became our rhythm. I woke up early, grabbed breakfast for both of us, and made sure he had what he needed before class. He'd grumble and complain, but his protests were softer now, more like habit than resistance. Thursday afternoon, the trainer cleared him for light rehab. He insisted I come along. "You're my ride," he said with a grin, though it was only a short walk across campus. The rehab room smelled faintly of antiseptic and rubber mats. Luke followed instructions carefully, grimacing through stretches, sweat beading at his temples. When the trainer stepped out for a moment, he leaned on the bench, catching his breath. "Man," he said between breaths, "I forgot how hard it is starting over." "You're doing great," I said. "Seriously, you're already ahead of schedule." He looked up, smiling faintly. "You really believe that?" "I wouldn't say it if I didn't." Something softened in his face. Gratitude, maybe, or just exhaustion. "You're a good friend, Ethan." The word friend hit differently than it used to. I nodded, but my throat felt tight. That night, we ordered takeout and watched a movie on my laptop. He was half lying, half sitting, his bad leg propped up on a pillow. Somewhere between the second and third act, his head tilted slightly, resting against the wall near mine. "You know," he said quietly, "I didn't think I'd handle this as well as I am." "Because you have me," I teased. He smiled, eyes half closed. "Yeah, probably." We stayed like that, close enough to feel each other's warmth but not touching. The movie played on, mostly forgotten. The glow from the screen caught the edge of his jaw, the curve of his neck. He looked peaceful for once, unguarded. My mind kept circling back to the same thought. I'd known Luke for years, but I'd never seen him like this. Stripped of the armor he wore on the field, he was softer, quieter, human in a way that drew me in. When the credits rolled, I closed the laptop. "You should sleep," I said. He nodded, eyes still on me. "You too." I turned off the light, but the dark didn't hide the small smile on his face, or the warmth spreading through my chest. As I lay there, I listened to his breathing even out. The sound was steady, almost comforting. I told myself it was just relief, that he was healing, that I was doing my job as a friend. But somewhere deep down, I knew it wasn't just that. There was something about the way he trusted me, the way he let me see him weak without shame. Something about the quiet spaces we shared when words felt too heavy. It wasn't love. Not yet. But it was something that felt dangerously close. And as I drifted off to sleep, I couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, this week was changing both of us in ways we didn't yet understand. The week stretched out like a slow film reel. Each day quiet, deliberate, looping between routine and revelation. Classes, training schedules, team meals. They all blurred together without Luke in them. For the first time, he wasn't out there running drills or cracking jokes in the locker room. He was here, stuck in the dorm, pacing between the window and his bed like a caged animal. By Tuesday morning, he was restless enough to drive both of us crazy. "Ethan," he called from his desk, one sneaker half-tied. "You sure you signed up to be my caretaker? Because I'm about 2 seconds from going out there on one leg." "Don't even think about it," I said, grabbing the shoe from him before he could try to tie it with his injured hand. "You'll undo everything the trainers fixed." He sighed, leaning back in his chair. "Feels like I'm falling behind. They're out there improving, and I'm in here watching the paint dry." "You're not falling behind," I said. "You're healing." He gave a humorless laugh. "Tell that to my scholarship." The words hung heavy in the room. Luke wasn't exaggerating. His athletic scholarship covered almost everything. Losing form meant losing security. I could see it weighing on him. The fear he tried to bury under sarcasm, the pride that kept him from showing just how scared he was. I crouched in front of him, tying the second shoe, trying to keep my voice calm. "You'll get it back. You always do." "You sound sure," he said quietly. "I am," I said, meeting his eyes. "You're Luke Barrett. You fight your way through everything." That earned me a faint smile. "You really think I'm invincible, huh?" "No," I said, standing. "Just too stubborn to quit." He laughed, softer this time, and I felt the tension break like a snapped thread. The days took on a rhythm. I helped him stretch before his rehab sessions, carried his bag, made sure he took his meds. He'd grumble and tease, but I could tell he appreciated it, especially when the pain spiked. Sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, I caught him flexing his shoulder or testing his thigh, just to see how far he could push it. By midweek, we'd found a strange kind of peace. The world outside went on: games, classes, parties. But our small dorm room became its own world. One night, after the team's away game, we ordered pizza and watched the stream from Luke's laptop. He tried to keep up the usual running commentary, yelling at the screen, cursing missed passes, but by the third quarter he was quiet. "They don't need me," he said finally, his voice flat. "Don't start," I said. "I'm serious, Ethan." He leaned forward, his good hand gripping his knee. "They're running fine without me. I'm supposed to be a leader, playmaker. Now I'm just, what? A guy on the bench waiting for permission to matter again." I looked at him, the frustration twisting across his face. "You're not defined by 1 week on the bench." He laughed bitterly. "That's easy for you to say. You're not the one whose name's on every game highlight reel." I wanted to argue, but I knew it wasn't about pride, it was fear. Fear of being forgotten, of losing identity. I took a breath. "Luke, you know what I see when I look at you? Someone who actually cares. About the team. About every damn play. About people. That's not something you lose because you're injured." He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the screen, the faint glow outlining his face. "You always know what to say, don't you?" "Not always," I said softly. "Only when it matters." Something flickered in his expression. Something raw, almost vulnerable. Then he nodded like he was locking it away again. "Thanks," he said finally. "Anytime." That night, long after we'd turned off the lights, Luke spoke again from the dark. "You ever feel like you're only as good as what you do?" The question came so quietly I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Yeah," I said after a moment. "All the time." He shifted on his bed. "My dad used to say that. You're only worth what you produce." If I didn't play well, he'd stop talking to me for a week. I turned my head toward him, even though I couldn't see his face. That's messed up. Yeah, he said, laughing softly. But he called it motivation. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the hum of the radiator and the faint wind outside. Then I said, "You're worth a lot more than that, Luke." He didn't respond right away. Then, almost a whisper, "Sometimes I believe you." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things unsaid, of trust quietly forming between us. The next afternoon, Luke's shoulder cramped mid-rehab. He hissed in pain, gripping his arm, jaw tight. "Hey, easy," I said, stepping closer. "Sit down." He lowered himself onto the bench, breathing shallow. "It's fine," he said through clenched teeth. "Yeah, you always say that right before it's not." I knelt in front of him, reaching for the compression gel the trainer had left us. "Let me help." He hesitated, then nodded, exhaling slowly. I warmed the gel between my palms, then pressed my fingers to the edge of his shoulder, working in slow, gentle circles. He flinched once, then relaxed as I found the tight spots. His skin was warm under my hands, the muscle twitching slightly as I worked the knot loose. "Tell me if it hurts," I said quietly. He shook his head. "Feels better, actually." I moved carefully, tracing the curve of his shoulder blade, mindful of the bruised tendon. The room was quiet except for our breathing. His eyes had drifted closed, jaw unclenched, trust radiating from him in the smallest ways. When I finished, I sat back, my hands still tingling. He opened his eyes slowly. "You missed your calling," he said with a tired smile. "You'd make a great trainer." "Maybe," I said, trying to sound casual even though my heart was hammering. "Guess I'm good with my hands." He chuckled softly. "Don't let Coach hear you say that. He'll have you working double duty." We laughed, but beneath it was something else. A hum of awareness neither of us named. By Friday night, the weather had turned. Rain tapped against the dorm window while we sat on opposite beds, music playing low between us. It was an easy silence, the kind that came from spending too much time together. Luke leaned back, eyes half closed, tapping his fingers against his knee. "You ever think about quitting football?" he asked suddenly. I looked up. "Quitting? You?" He shrugged. "Yeah, I mean, what comes after this? What if all this," he gestured toward his taped shoulder, "just ends one day?" I thought for a moment. "Then you figure out who you are without it." He looked over at me, curious. "And who are you without it?" I smiled faintly, still trying to find out. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, me too." The room went quiet again. Outside, thunder rolled far off, soft and steady. He broke the silence with a question that surprised me. "You ever feel like you don't fit what people expect you to be?" I hesitated. "All the time." "Like what?" "Like I'm supposed to be this confident, outgoing guy. Always sure, always in control. But half the time, I'm just figuring it out as I go." Luke studied me, something thoughtful in his gaze. "That's funny," he said. "I always thought you had it together." I laughed softly. "Then I must be a good actor." He smiled, shaking his head. "Guess we both are." The storm grew louder, rain streaking the window. Luke's eyes flicked toward it, then back to me. "You ever get tired of pretending?" he asked quietly. "Yeah," I said. "But sometimes pretending's the only way to survive." He nodded like he understood that too well. For a long while we didn't talk, just sat there, the sound of rain filling the space between us. Then Luke stretched his legs out and said softly, "You know, I don't hate this, being stuck here with you." I smiled. "Good, because you're not getting rid of me anytime soon." He laughed, the kind that reached his eyes this time. "Wouldn't want to." The words lingered. He leaned his head back against the wall, eyelids drooping, the faintest smile still playing on his lips. I turned off the lamp but didn't sleep right away. I kept thinking about what he'd said. That he didn't hate this. That maybe, beneath the frustration and the fear, there was something growing between us. Not the loud kind of feeling you can point to or explain. The quiet kind. The kind that sneaks up on you between shared silences and small acts of care. As the storm faded into a steady drizzle, Luke mumbled something in his sleep. My name, I thought, though maybe I just wanted it to be. Either way, it stayed with me. That week had started with an injury, but somewhere between the ice packs and the late-night talks, something else had begun to heal. Something neither of us had realized was broken in the first place. The doctor's words hung in the air like a slow echo. Another 2 weeks minimum, he said, jotting notes on his clipboard. You're healing, but not fast enough to rush it. Push too early and you'll tear it again. Luke sat there on the examination table, jaw tight, the muscles in his good arm flexing unconsciously. 2 weeks, he repeated, voice low. Coach said I might be cleared by Friday. The doctor sighed. Coach isn't your shoulder. Listen to your body. Then he was gone, the door swinging shut behind him. For a few seconds, the room was silent except for the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Luke's hands clenched around the edge of the table. I could see the tremor in his fingers, the kind that came from anger held in too long. 2 weeks, he muttered again. Might as well say forever. It's not forever, I said carefully. It's... Don't, he snapped, standing up too fast. Don't tell me it's fine, Ethan. The sound of my name like that, sharp, frustrated, hit harder than I expected. I watched him pace, shoulders tense, eyes darting toward the wall like he was searching for something to hit. I've been out for what, 10 days? And now they're saying 2 more weeks. He laughed bitterly. You know what happens when someone's out that long? Someone else takes your spot. You come back and suddenly you're not the guy anymore. Luke, he turned on me. You don't get it. You've never had to prove you're worth your place every single day. That's not fair, I said quietly. Fair. He shook his head, his voice rising. Nothing about this is fair. I trained harder than anyone. And now I'm watching from the sidelines because of one stupid hit. I let him talk. He needed to. The air between us vibrated with every word, his anger bouncing off the walls like static. Then suddenly he kicked the edge of the bench. The metal clanged against the floor, echoing through the empty rehab room. He winced, grabbing at his bad leg, but didn't stop pacing. I hate this, he said, voice cracking. I hate feeling useless. I hate that I can't even tie my own shoes without you hovering. That one stung more than I wanted it to. I took a slow breath. I'm not hovering. I'm helping. Same thing, he muttered. No, it's not, I said, my patience fraying. You think I'm doing this because I have to? He scoffed. Aren't you? The words hit like a slap. I took a step closer. You think I'm here out of obligation? That I want to spend my week chasing after a guy who won't even let himself accept help? His head snapped up, eyes burning. Then why are you here, Ethan? Because you're the nice guy? The fixer? The one who can't stand to see someone else in pain? The air between us went still. My pulse was loud in my ears. I didn't plan the words that came next. They just tore their way out of me. Because I want to be here, Luke. Because you matter to me. And not just as a teammate. Silence. The kind that felt like the world holding its breath. Luke stared at me, his chest rising and falling fast, like he was trying to process what I just said. The anger drained from his face, replaced by something else. Confusion, fear, maybe even understanding. What do you mean? He asked, voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard. I mean, I don't stay because Coach told me to. I stay because I care about you. Because seeing you hurt, watching you beat yourself up, feels worse than anything that's ever happened to me on the field. He looked down, rubbing the back of his neck with his good hand. You don't know what it's like to feel weak, he said softly. To have everyone look at you like you're broken. Yeah, I said, stepping closer. You're right. I don't know what it's like to have everyone expect you to be indestructible. But I do know what it's like to care about someone who keeps pretending they don't need anyone. He glanced up, eyes meeting mine. They were tired, raw, but open in a way I hadn't seen before. I can't stand being dependent, he said. On anyone. You're not dependent, I said. You're human. He laughed bitterly, but there was no bite in it. You make it sound so simple. It is, I said quietly. At least it should be. We stood there, the space between us charged with everything we hadn't said over the past week. The hum of the lights above seemed too loud. I could see the flicker of every emotion crossing his face. Anger, shame, gratitude, something like longing. Finally, he sat back down on the bench, shoulders slumping. I didn't mean to take it out on you. I know. He paused, exhaling hard. I hate feeling small. I moved closer, crouching down so we were eye level. You're not small. You're allowed to be hurt. You're allowed to need help. His lips twitched, like he wanted to argue but couldn't. He looked at me, really looked, like he was seeing me for the first time. You always show up, he said softly, even when I push you away. Yeah, I said, smiling faintly. That's kind of my thing. He let out a shaky breath, a half-laugh that sounded like relief. You're gonna make it really hard to stay mad at you. Good, I said, because I'm not going anywhere. The tension slowly unraveled, replaced by something quieter, something neither of us dared to name. He stared down at his hand resting on his knee, then looked up again. You know, he said, sometimes I think you believe in me more than I believe in myself. Someone's got to, I said. He smiled small, real. Then his voice dropped lower. That scares me a little. Why? Because it means you see parts of me I try to hide. I held his gaze. Maybe that's the point. He didn't answer, just looked at me for a long time, the corner of his mouth twitching like he was about to speak, then changing his mind. I could feel the shift in the air again, that same weightless moment before something breaks. Only this time it wasn't anger. It was realization, understanding. He leaned forward slightly, his injured shoulder trembling just a little under the strain. Ethan, he said, and the way he said my name, soft, almost fragile, made my pulse stumble. Yeah. Thank you, he said, for staying. I swallowed, my throat dry. Always. We stayed there in silence, the distance between us barely a breath. His good hand rested on the bench beside mine, fingers close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from his skin. Neither of us moved. Neither of us needed to. Everything we hadn't said all week hung there, unspoken but undeniable. After a long moment, he sat back, breaking the tension with a deep breath. Guess I needed to hear that, he said quietly. Guess I needed to say it, I replied. He smiled again, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes but was real all the same. You know, you're terrible at following boundaries. Yeah, I said, but you're terrible at asking for help, so I'd say we're even. That got a small laugh from him, the kind of laugh that sounded like a wound beginning to close. When we left the rehab room, the sky outside was washed in late afternoon gold. Luke's limp was lighter, his steps slower but more deliberate. We didn't talk much on the walk back to the dorm. We didn't have to. Every brush of his shoulder against mine, every glance that lingered too long, carried more weight than any confession could. By the time we reached our hallway, the silence between us had softened into something steady. At the door, Luke paused, hand on the knob. Hey, he said, looking at me over his shoulder. Yeah, you were right, he said, about me not being alone in this. I smiled. Took you long enough. He chuckled, shaking his head as he stepped inside. You're insufferable. Maybe, I said, following him in. But I'm still here. He didn't answer right away, just looked at me, really looked, then nodded. Yeah, you are. And in that quiet acknowledgement, everything changed. No kiss, no dramatic gesture, just two people standing in the fading light, finally seeing each other clearly for the first time. The truth didn't need words. It was there in the way he breathed a little easier when I was near, and the way I felt steadier when he looked at me. Whatever this was, whatever it was becoming, it had stopped being about duty a long time ago. It was something deeper, something real, something neither of us could ignore anymore. The days that followed felt lighter, like a storm had passed and left the air clean. The tension that used to hang between us, the quiet frustration, the sharp edges of pride and guilt, was gone. What replaced it wasn't quite easy, but it was something close to peace. Luke's shoulder was healing, his stride stronger. The bruises that had once marked his leg were fading into faint yellow patches. He still moved carefully, but the pain lines on his face were softer now. More than once that week, I caught him smiling for no reason. The first morning I noticed it, I was halfway through making coffee when I looked up and saw him leaning against the counter, watching me. "What?" I asked. He shrugged, eyes warm. "You make coffee like it's an Olympic sport." I laughed. "I take pride in my craft." "Oh, I can tell. You even swirl it like a barista." "Jealous?" "Maybe a little." He smirked, then winced when his shoulder pulled. "See? Karma. Mock me and the universe smacks your rotator cuff." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I'm not sure that's how karma works." "It's how it works in this kitchen," I said, handing him his mug. Our fingers brushed as he took it. Just a small touch, but it lingered in the air between us longer than it should have. He didn't pull away. We slipped back into a rhythm, but it was different now. Slower, more deliberate, like we both understood that time itself was part of the healing. I still helped him with small things, lifting groceries, carrying books, but it wasn't out of obligation anymore. It was just what I wanted to do. Luke didn't fight it anymore either. One afternoon, while we were cleaning up, he stopped mid-motion and reached toward me with his good arm. "Hold still," he said. I froze. He leaned closer, his fingers brushing against my collarbone as he straightened the fold of my shirt collar. His touch was soft, deliberate. "There," he said, voice quieter now. "Couldn't take you seriously with that sticking up like a kid on picture day." "Thanks, Mom," I said, my tone teasing but my pulse doing its own thing entirely. He grinned, but his hand didn't fall away right away. It hovered there for a second longer, fingers still near my throat, before he stepped back. "Guess that makes us even," he said. "You fix me up, I fix your wardrobe." "Fair trade," I replied, pretending to sound casual, but my heart was still catching up. We took our first walk outside that Friday. The sun had finally shown itself again, warming the wet ground left by last night's rain. Luke wore a loose hoodie, his sling gone now but his shoulder still wrapped for support. "You sure you're ready?" I asked, watching him adjust his footing. He gave me a look. "You gonna hover the whole time?" "Force of habit. Try breaking it." I smirked. "Not sure I want to." He rolled his eyes but smiled anyway. And that was enough. We walked the loop around the practice field. The smell of cut grass and damp earth hung in the air. From a distance, the team was running drills. Faint shouts and whistles carried on the breeze. Luke slowed a little as he watched, his face unreadable. "You miss it?" I asked quietly. He nodded. "Yeah, but not the way I thought I would." "What do you mean?" He kicked at a pebble on the path. "I thought I'd feel jealous, angry, but I just feel ready, like it's waiting for me instead of leaving me behind." "That's a good feeling," I said. "Yeah," he said, glancing at me. "I think I have you to thank for that." I tried to wave it off, but he stopped walking. "No, I mean it," he said. "You kept me from disappearing into my own head. You never treated me like I was broken." I looked at him then, the wind catching a few strands of his hair, sunlight cutting across his face. "That's because you weren't." He smiled softly. "You say that like it's fact." It is. For a long moment, neither of us moved. The team's shouts faded in the distance, the world narrowing to just the two of us standing in the middle of the field path. Then he nodded, eyes dropping to the ground before looking back up. "You know," he said quietly, "I've been trying to figure this out." "This? Us," he said. The word came out steady, but his voice had that same rough edge it did when he was unsure. "I don't know what this is, but it feels right." The breeze lifted between us, cool against my skin. "Yeah," I said, my voice low. "It does." Neither of us said more. We didn't need to. We kept walking, slower now. His shoulder brushed mine once, then again, small accidental touches that neither of us pulled away from. That evening, back in the dorm, Luke sat cross-legged on his bed, scrolling through his phone. The soft yellow light from the desk lamp made the room look warmer than usual. He looked up when I came in, tossing his phone aside. "I was thinking," he said. "When I'm cleared to play again, I'm taking you out." I raised an eyebrow. "Out where?" "Anywhere. Doesn't matter. Dinner, movies, something." "That sounds dangerously close to a date." He gave me that sideways grin, the one that always started in his eyes before it reached his mouth. "Maybe it is. Maybe it's just gratitude. Guess you'll have to wait and see." I chuckled, sitting down across from him. "You planning on making me guess until then? Wouldn't be fun otherwise." He leaned back on his hands, his shoulders relaxing in a way I hadn't seen since before the injury. There was still a quietness about him, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was the kind of quiet that comes with knowing you're safe. After a few minutes, he looked over at me again. "You ever think about how weird it is that all this happened? Define weird. Like one bad hit and suddenly everything changes. Not just for me, but for us." I nodded slowly. "Yeah. Funny how that works." He smiled faintly. "You think it's supposed to happen like that?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "But I think sometimes things fall apart just to make room for something better." He looked at me for a long time, and for once, there wasn't any hesitation in his eyes. "You really believe that?" "I do." He didn't say anything, just nodded, but his gaze stayed on me a second longer than usual. Later that night, after lights out, the silence between us was easy again, the kind that didn't need to be filled. "You ever wonder what people would say?" Luke asked suddenly in the dark. "About what?" "About us spending all this time together. About you helping me like this." I smiled faintly in the dark. "Probably that I'm the most patient roommate on the planet." He laughed softly, the sound low and genuine. "Yeah, maybe that's it." But something in his tone told me he was thinking of more. I was too. For a long while, I just listened to his breathing even out, steady and calm. My eyes had adjusted to the dark, and I could make out the faint shape of him turned on his side, facing me. "Ethan?" he said softly. "Yeah. Thanks," he murmured. "For staying. For everything." I swallowed the warmth rising in my chest. "Always." He smiled, the kind of smile you can hear even when you can't see it. "Good night," he said. "Good night, Luke." The next morning, sunlight spilled through the window, catching the dust in the air like gold. Luke was already awake, sitting on the edge of his bed, tying his shoe with both hands for the first time in weeks. I blinked, grinning. "Well, look at you." He looked up, a small triumphant smile on his face. "Told you I'd get there. You sure you don't want me to?" "Nope," he said, standing. "Think I've got this one." I nodded. "Yeah, you do." He reached for his jacket, then hesitated, glancing at me. "You coming to rehab later? Wouldn't miss it." He smiled, slipping his arm through the sleeve. "Didn't think you would." Something about the way he said it, calm, certain, quietly fond, settled deep inside me. As he stepped toward the door, the sunlight hit his shoulder, tracing the line of movement where the bruises used to be. "Hey, Ethan." "Yeah." He turned slightly, meeting my eyes. "You know that thing I said? About this feeling, right?" "Yeah." He smiled softly. "Still does." And with that, he was gone, off to another small step in his recovery, the door closing gently behind him. I stood there for a moment, the quiet stretching around me, and realized something simple and undeniable. It wasn't about duty anymore. It hadn't been for a while. It was about choosing to care, choosing to stay, choosing him. And somehow that choice felt like the most natural thing in the world. The air had that unmistakable bite of early winter, crisp, electric, alive with energy. Floodlights hummed over the field, cutting through the cold dusk and painting the turf in gold and white. You could smell the mix of grass, sweat, and adrenaline long before kickoff. It had been 5 weeks since the hit. 5 weeks since the sound of cracking pads had made my stomach twist, since the long nights of pain and silence and quiet understanding. Now Luke stood at the edge of the field again, helmet in one hand, confidence in the other. He looked whole again. Not just physically, but deeper than that. The shadows under his eyes were gone, replaced by a quiet steadiness. His movements were careful but sure, his gaze focused in that old familiar way. Watching him warm up felt strange, like seeing someone return from a place you didn't realize they'd been lost to. Coach clapped a hand on his back as he passed. "Good to have you back, Barrett." Luke nodded, jaw set. "Feels good to be back." From the sideline, I couldn't stop smiling. My chest felt too tight, but not from nerves, from pride. From knowing what it took to get here. He caught my eye from across the field. Just a flicker of a glance, but enough. His helmet tilted slightly, the corner of his mouth lifting beneath the face guard. A silent acknowledgement, we made it. When the whistle blew, the crowd erupted. Luke lined up on the outside, knees bent, eyes locked on the snap. For a split second, the months of frustration and healing vanished. The moment the ball moved, so did he. Fluid, fast, confident. He cut through defenders like a shadow, his body remembering every motion as if it had never forgotten. On the second play, he caught a short pass, spun off a tackle, and sprinted downfield. The crowd's roar was deafening. I yelled his name before I could stop myself. By the time the play ended, he was surrounded by teammates, their cheers echoing under the lights. He turned toward the sideline, scanning the crowd until he found me again. This time he didn't smile, he just nodded once. And somehow that was better. The game rolled on. The cold deepened, the air turning visible with every breath. I watched every snap like it was a heartbeat. Luke wasn't the star of every play, but he didn't have to be. He was steady, strong where he'd once been fragile, patient where he'd once been restless. When he limped slightly after a hard tackle, my chest clenched. But then he stood tall, shook it off, and jogged back to the huddle. The sideline erupted again. By the final whistle, our team had won. Not by a landslide, but enough. The kind of victory that felt earned, not handed. As the field filled with players and coaches and shouting fans, I hung back. The lights shimmered on the helmets like falling stars. Luke's jersey was smeared with grass and sweat, his hair damp against his forehead, but he looked lighter than I'd seen him in months. He was laughing with the guys, his smile wide and unguarded. And yet, every few seconds, his eyes drifted toward me. When the celebration finally began to die down, he broke away from the group and headed for the tunnel. I followed without even thinking. Inside, the noise from the field faded into a low, echoing hum. The tunnel lights buzzed faintly, throwing long shadows across the concrete walls. Luke was already there, leaning against the wall, helmet hanging loosely from his hand. For a moment, neither of us spoke. His breathing was still uneven from the game, his chest rising and falling under his shoulder pads. Then he said quietly, "Did you see that first catch?" I smiled. "I saw everything." He chuckled, rubbing his neck. "Didn't think I'd make it through the first quarter." "You made it through all four," I said, "and made it look easy." "Easy," he repeated, shaking his head. "You know what's funny? It didn't feel easy at all. But it felt right." I stepped closer, the sound of cleats clicking against the floor. "Because you were ready." He looked at me for a long moment, the weight of the silence between us settling into something familiar. "You kept me together when I was falling apart," he said finally. I tried to laugh it off, but the words hit deep. "That's what teammates do." He didn't look away. "No," he said softly. "That's what you did." I swallowed hard. "You would have done the same for me." "Maybe," he said, his voice quieter now, "but not like that." There it was again, that small shift in the air, that quiet gravity pulling everything inward. He stepped closer until I could see the faint scrape on his cheek, the curve of a half-smile that wasn't about victory or relief. "I meant what I said before," he murmured. "I don't know what this is, but it feels right." I nodded, barely trusting my voice. "Yeah," I said finally, "it does." We stood there in the tunnel, side by side, our shoulders brushing. No words, no need for them. The air smelled faintly of rain and turf and something electric. Outside, the crowd's cheers began to fade into the distance. Inside, It was just us. The hum of lights above and the quiet pulse of understanding between two people who'd spent months pretending not to feel what had been there all along. Luke glanced toward the tunnel exit, then back at me. You know, he said, the weird thing about healing is, it's not just about the body. I smiled. No, it's not. He nodded, his eyes steady on mine. You fixed more than my shoulder. Don't give me that much credit, I said softly. Too late, he replied, his grin faint but real. He reached out then, resting a hand briefly on my arm. It was nothing dramatic, just a small, grounding touch, but it carried more meaning than anything either of us could have said. After a moment, he let his hand fall, taking a step back. You gonna walk out with me? Always. We started toward the exit, our footsteps echoing together. As we reached the edge of the tunnel, the stadium lights spilled in again, flooding the space with silver and gold. Luke stopped just before stepping into the glow. He turned to me, a slow, almost shy smile on his face. Let's see where this goes, he said. Off the field. For a second, all I could do was look at him. The same guy who, weeks ago, could barely lift his arm, now standing there strong, steady, and somehow more open than ever. Yeah, I said quietly. Off the field. He grinned, eyes bright, then stepped out into the light. Later, as I stood by the bleachers watching him talk to reporters and teammates, something inside me settled. Not the kind of closure that ends a story, the kind that starts a new one. I realized I didn't need to define what we were, or where it was going. Some things didn't need names. They just needed time. The scoreboard flickered above, the crowd slowly thinning. Luke caught sight of me again, lifted a hand in a small wave. I waved back. It wasn't a grand moment. It didn't need to be. It was enough. As I turned to leave, the night air hit my face. Cold, clean, full of possibility. Behind me, the field lights buzzed softly, and somewhere in the distance, Luke's laughter carried through the dark. I smiled, hands in my jacket pockets, walking toward the parking lot with the faint sound of victory still echoing behind me. The season wasn't over. Neither were we. Whatever this was, whatever it would become, it had started the way the best things always did, quietly, honestly, and without plan. And for the first time in a long time, that was more than enough.